Alright, welcome back to part 2 of Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. Before we start, I want to mention that Wood did not create these techniques. Wood learned these techniques from the artist who came before him, and he went on to further develop these ideas. In the world of art, this was a time-tested way for an artist to develop their skills. Leonardo da Vinci didn't become one of the world's most famous artists overnight and all by himself. He spent almost a decade studying under the tutelage of a master artist named Andrea del Verrocchio. Wood's first professional job was that as a background artist to Will Eisner. And if you look at Eisner's work, he was doing most of these panels years before Wood joined him. Shortly after getting that job, Wood got a second job assisting George Wonder, who drew Terry and the Pirates. And at that time, Terry and the Pirates was one of the most popular daily and Sunday newspaper strips in America. Wood learned the techniques from these two masters and was able to take what he learned to another level. With all that being said, let's move on to where we left off in the last video. Okay, we're going to start off with a panel called All Black or All Dark Background. Visually, when you have a black background, it pushes the bright object in the panel forward, which helps give it a three-dimensional feel. From a storytelling standpoint, the black or dark background can set the mood of the story. Let's take a look at this panel from Wood's sexy adventure heroine, Sally Forth. The black background puts emphasis on the shape of the female figure. Wood is forcing the viewer's eyes to naturally look towards the curves of her body, and in this case, your eyes are naturally drawn towards her boobs and her butt. And this is really one of those clever artist tricks because Wood is forcing your eyes to go there. Of course, Wood did not invent this trick. Artists have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's called tenebrism. And tenebrism is an Italian term, I believe, and it loosely means dark, gloomy, mysterious, and that's in reference to the background. One of the best known artists to use tenebrism is Rembrandt. Here's one of his most famous paintings. It's called The Night Watch. Notice how the light objects in the painting are dramatically clashing against the background, and the darkness is receding while pushing the bright objects forward towards the viewer. And as I mentioned before, visually, your eyes are being drawn toward the lighter objects in the painting. The next panel we have is called One Big Object. Hand, gun, lamp, phone, ... From an artistic point of view, an object in the foreground creates depth in the panel. But as a storytelling device, the object in the foreground and the subject in the background have some sort of relationship with each other and they tell a story. And I'll show you a couple of quick examples of it. Let's take a quick look at this soldier picture. We have a sleeping soldier taking up a large portion of the foreground, and in the background you can see the enemy soldiers are sneaking up on him. This is really great storytelling because it builds up tension and drama. Okay, here's another great panel, and it's a slight variation of what we just talked about. Here in this moon drawing, the largest object is not in the foreground. The tiny spaceship is actually in the foreground. But the size of the moon in regards to the spaceship makes the spaceship seem insignificant, which was the effect Wood was going for. Wood adds drama in this panel by putting the Earth in the background, and by showing that the Earth is so far away, it gives the viewer a sense of isolation and helplessness. Again, the best way that this panel gets used is when the large object in the foreground and the object in the background combine to help tell the story. Okay, moving on to panel number 9. Here we have another open panel. This time we have a full figure open panel. And if you saw the previous video, the open panel is a panel with no border lines around it. I'm pretty sure Wood does this to visually break up the monotony of the standard page layout. I notice when Wood does these open panels, very often he places the open panel in the center of the page. And by doing that, the page now has a sense of symmetry. In addition to having open panels with full figures, Wood has a variation on this panel where he combines this panel with the big head panel that we talked about in the first video. This is sort of a missing panel from the reference sheet. Ooh, I like to call it the floating head. The only way I can describe it is it's a full floating head in an open panel. This panel has a purpose all its own, which is actually separate from the full figure open panel that we just talked about. It can be used for exposition instead of a narration box, and it can also be used as a transition between scenes. Another thing that the floating head panel can do is that it can be used as a fourth wall break. Wood doesn't usually use it this way. Wood doesn't do a lot of fourth wall breaking in his stories, but over the years I've seen other artists use it this way, and I've seen it a lot in anthology-style horror comics where they have some ghoulish host acting as a narrator. A variation on the full-figure open panel that we just covered a minute or two ago is what Wood called the reverse silhouette, black or Ben-Day bottom open. In this panel, Wood draws a partial background, and in most cases the bottom is left open and the characters are just sort of dangling in open space. Sometimes he'll flip it 90 degrees and he'll have the open space on the side. Basically, regardless of how it's done, it's a partial background. Our next panel is called Small Figure Ben-Day. In our last video, I didn't talk about Ben-Day dots, and guess what? I'm not talking about them in this video either. I will save that for another video all its own. So, small figures serve a lot of purposes. Wood uses small figures in the background as a way to create depth. He also uses small figures to show action and big sweeping motions. A lot of times, the small figure is used to show a character in regards to their environment. Wood does that a lot in his science fiction comics. And a lot of times also he uses the figures to end a story, and he'll put them in the last panel with the characters waving goodbye to each other. Panel 12 is important to drawing in general, not just to comics. Wood simply titled this panel, Depth. Your page or your computer screen has only one dimension to it. It's flat. And it's your job as the artist to make your drawings appear three-dimensional. Unless you're going for some sort of flat style, you want the subjects in your drawings to have a sense of weight and distance. Perspective plays a big part in creating this. Wood does a lot of 1- and 2-point perspectives, and his drawings have a lot of rounded shapes such as arches that move in and out of the panel. Another thing Wood does to create depth is that he doesn't draw backgrounds flat on. He will draw them from an angle, and that way there's a lot of shadows and contrast. One thing that really jumped out at me was his use of circles and holes. Here's some examples of that. And in this center rocket ship panel, it feels like you can almost look down and see into the lower deck. And if you notice, it's basically a simple oval with an edge, and he's put a background underneath. I found a great example of depth from Wood's Mad Magazine years. He shows depth by having characters and sound effects overlapping panels, and there's a character actually trying to drop from one panel into another panel. He also has characters ripping away at the panel, revealing that there's another layer underneath the page. Okay, that was a great example, but when I came across this page, I just went, wow. This is a concept page, and I don't think it was meant to be viewed as a series of panels, but as an entire complete page. The action on the page is forcing the viewer to read the page in a non-traditional manner. Wood is forcing the viewer to follow the characters as they go down into sort of this underground crypt, and visually, he is forcing the viewer to read the panel in sort of a S pattern, sort of right to left as opposed to the normal direction we read. This is a really amazing idea, and I wonder where he got the idea from. He also did this same thing in one of his Thunder Agents books. As for depth, this page has it all. He uses contrast, shadows, and shading. He overlaps characters and word balloons. He uses perspective, and he uses small figures like we talked about before. And one really cool thing that he does is that he uses the ground as his panel borders, so that it looks like you're seeing through the ground as they descend deeper into the crypt. Another way to show depth is in our next panel. And if you've ever read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, Lee and Buscema call this the bird's eye view. Wood also does the bird's eye view, but he adds a little twist to it, and he calls it the downshot cast shadows panel. This panel is drawn from a higher angle, of course, and Wood includes a long shadow with the figure, and it's pretty straightforward, and here's some examples of it. All right, I think this is a great place to end this video. We crossed the 10-minute mark, and let's leave it at that. Hopefully I'll finish Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work in the next video. I hope you found this video educational and enjoyable. I know those two don't often go hand in hand. If you're a comic artist or a creator, I would really love to hear what you have to say in the comment section down below. And I think other comic creators or people thinking about making their own comics would really be interested in your insights. So please tell us what your thoughts are on this. And please feel free to go into as much detail as you want. And I promise I will get to this video. I teased this panel in the first video. I really thought we could get to it at the end of this video, but we crossed that like 10-minute mark, and I thought that's all people can handle. So my apologies, my bad. I can't wait to tell you what I found in this panel. But I really, I love this panel. I can't wait to show you what I found in this panel. I will start the next video with this panel, and I hope you'll join me, and I hope it blows you away like it did me. Well, that's all for me. Hope to see you again in the next video. Until next time, stay super, everyone. Bye.